We live in a globalized world of finance, high finance. There's enormous mobility of financial capital that has increased over the last 25-30 years at a phenomenal pace. Yet the regulators are at the national level. Central banks try to regulate their own territorial jurisdiction within which they can operate. So that, some people have said, that can lead to dissonance in the circuit of finance, and we could have these financial crises that can have very adverse effects, particularly on developing countries.
Globalization itself is an advantage, but also is a disadvantage. But we developing countries, we are lucky that we have not yet globalized our economy so much with the global financial hubs and services, although we are increasing it. More than 50% of our economy is now globalized, traded all around. We need to balance our act, for avoiding that kind of situation. I thought, the financial inclusion is one of the strategies. You need to take the money to the real economy, because the banks were created for helping the real economy.
You are well known for, taking a non-traditional kind of stance as the central bank leader, but there is this tension between the task of controlling inflation, which most banks are now doing, central bank inflation targeting, and development finance or interest rate management. And now there's a slowdown, so world over central bankers are reducing policy rates. Yet there's always sort of inflation looming on the horizon. So how do you face this challenge between these twin objectives, so to say?
What we did in Bangladesh, through financial inclusion, we increased the demand, and at the same time, through various kinds of refinance, we put in money for the supply chains, so that the supply also came out. So we put in a lot of money for agriculture, because the food inflation was coming mainly because of the lack of supply of food. So once we increased the food supply, the food inflation came down. The moment food inflation came down, which is about 65% income of the poor people daily spent on food. So once it comes down, it has got a moderating effect on the overall inflation.
So you were able to manage
it's a balancing act. And again, we also have to be very open to the international finance as well. And during my tenure as a governor, I really approved $8 billion as a private capital coming from abroad. So this was, and I used to be chair that committee, of the Board of Investment Committee, we call it, because our rate of interest in the global domestic rate of interest was very high because inflation was high. So we had to attract money at a lower rate of interest. So maximum 5% we allowed, and then we got the money from abroad, about $8 billion. That really pulled down the rate of interest of the other banks who were handling at a higher rate. But in between, so poor people were not getting the advantage. For that matter, we created this financial inclusion strategy through refinance. So if you give money to a spice farmer, you can give it at 4%, 6% rate of interest will give you a subsidy. I had to negotiate with the Ministry of Finance so that I will adjust it from the central bank balance sheet. So that's how we brought it down, actually.
This brings me to my last question, is that, managing central bank finances in an inclusive fashion and bringing, as you mentioned, not the few but the many into the fold of banking, there is again some kind of an anxiety that often the bankers feel, that would it be too much of an interventionist kind of central bank, or because central banks are supposed to be the regulator, they stand aloof in a way. So how did you manage that kind of perception that could arise that, oh, we have a very interventionist central bank?
We didn't really interfere with the market. What we did, we facilitated market so that they work for the poor, for the disadvantaged. For example, Bragg Bank, which is the best bank I would call it, 60% of their portfolio is on SMEs, and they're doing better. So it's the poor who really return money. They care to return money.
Yes.
We encouraged banks to go digital, encouraged banks to go to the rural areas, because I didn't allow any of the banks to open urban branch unless they have done 2 rural branches. So that's how you really take the banks to the people, and through agent banking, through mobile banking, through booth banking, you really take the banks to the ground, to the people.
Number of innovations.
Then that's why you provide for many, not for few. You need to do good finance, not ugly finance.
He touches a chord when he says that the central bank has to work and finance has to work, whether it's global or local, for the many and not just the few. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.